Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving right into a seriously fascinating text called Architect of Ambition, the Synergy of Mind and Goal. We're going to unpack a truly transformative idea here. You see, achieving your goals, it isn't just about aggressively checking boxes on some massive to-do list. It's actually about calibrating the incredibly complex, intricate machinery of your own mind. Think of your mind as this vast, open landscape, and your goal is that specific chosen point way out in the distance. When you put those two together, they form the absolute bedrock of all our personal growth.
But, well, this brings up a question we all face, right? Why do we so often set these huge, ambitious goals, only to completely fall short? We've all been there. We've all struggled with those unmet New Year's resolutions or, stared at that literal graveyard of abandoned hobbies taking up space in the garage. But instead of beating ourselves up and framing this as a lack of willpower or a lack of talent, our source material completely reframes it. It's an internal mechanical mismatch. The failure isn't in what you're capable of doing. It's actually just a misalignment in your mental machinery.
Now, I want you to completely flip your standard perspective for a second. Listen to this quote. Goals are not external objects, but internal commitments. They are born in your thoughts way, way before they ever manifest into physical action. When you sit down and imagine building a better business or getting healthier, you are literally giving a specific set of coordinates to that vast landscape of your mind. Your goals are fundamentally shaped by your values, and they're either locked down or blown wide open by your personal belief systems. So, let's dive into phase one, the blueprint of ambition. This is all about how we draft meaningful goals.
It really all starts with your current state of mind. A focused mind is the absolute, non-negotiable starting point for any true ambition. It just effortlessly cuts through the noise, distinguishing the truly important stuff from the trivial, and it prioritizes long-term fulfillment. On the flip side, though, a distracted, confused mind just churns out these shallow, inconsistent goals that kind of change whichever way the wind blows. If you skip getting that initial mental clarity, your goals are for sure just going to lead to a loop of endless dissatisfaction. And that naturally brings us to the sheer power of visualization. But actually, let me be clear here, based on our source text, we are not talking about just staring out a window and daydreaming. Visualization is a highly strategic cognitive process. It is literally the first gear that prepares your brain to take action. When you vividly, clearly imagine achieving a goal, your mind starts to automatically align your thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors directly toward that outcome. It takes this abstract, fuzzy idea and transforms it into a perceived reality, drumming up the exact motivation and direction you need to actually get moving. Moving right along to section 2, the gears. Let's look at conscious versus subconscious alignment. Okay, so here is the brutal reality of cognitive dissonance. Picture this. You've got your conscious mind actively setting goals and making all these grand plans above the surface. But churning right below that, your subconscious mind is entirely running the show, governing your deep habits, your emotions, and your automatic responses. The text points out something fascinating. If your conscious goal mismatches your subconscious fears, say you consciously really want to scale your business, but subconsciously you are terrified of the added responsibility, progress will literally grind to a halt. It's that intense friction between what we think we want and what we automatically do that totally stalls us out. So how do we fix that internal friction? Well, first, you've got to build supportive habits so your mind doesn't have to constantly burn precious energy, making brand new decisions every single day. It can just glide along established patterns. Second, carefully manage your physical environment and your social circles. This is a hugely strategic way to reinforce positive beliefs because our surroundings totally shape our thought patterns. And third, you absolutely have to address those limiting internal beliefs head on. Why? Because the mind operates almost entirely based on what it fundamentally believes to be true. All right, section 3, building the execution engine. Let's talk about driving momentum forward. People talk about motivation all the time, right? But motivation is really just the spark. It kicks off the desire. Discipline, on the other hand, is the actual bridge that sustains your effort. The source emphasizes a huge point here. Discipline is not some innate personality trait that you're just born with or without. It is a trained mental function. It's the simple ability to act on your decisions, rather than just relying on fleeting, temporary emotions. When your mind is disciplined, it pushes right through discomfort and distraction to actually hit the result. But keep in mind that execution engine absolutely requires crystal clear direction. Clarity is honestly probably the most underestimated quality of the human mind when we talk about goal setting. A vague goal produces vague results. It is exactly like typing a fuzzy, incomplete address into your brain's GPS system. You're just going to end up lost. When you define a goal with absolute specificity and real purpose, you hand your mind a precise target. And doing that dramatically reduces confusion, spikes your efficiency, and makes your decision-making so much sharper. Now, we also have to talk about how our mind perceives time. Naturally, human brains are hardwired to prioritize immediate, instant rewards. I mean, that's exactly why scrolling through social media feels infinitely easier than sitting down to write out a business plan. To enforce a timeline that actually values long-term results, we have to trick our brains a little bit to bridge that gap. We do this in the short term by breaking massive goals down into tiny, actionable steps and setting strict deadlines. This literally trains the brain to delay gratification so you can finally reach those deeply meaningful future outcomes. Which brings us to Section 4, the shock absorbers, overcoming internal resistance. Look, internal resistance is just inevitable. It's gonna happen. And surprisingly enough, failure often comes from the mind's flat-out unwillingness to fully support the goal, rather than a lack of actual physical skill. This resistance sneaks up as fear and doubt or these toxic internal narratives that just put on a loop, that success isn't possible for you. It shows up as poor emotional regulation, letting everyday stress and anxiety completely derail your focus. And honestly, the sneakiest one of all, overplanning. Your mind will sometimes seek absolute perfection in the planning phase purely as a subconscious way to avoid actually taking action. Crazy, right? So to combat all that resistance, we need the ultimate shock absorber, resilience. Absolutely no meaningful goal is ever achieved without hitting obstacles like failure or rejection or massive delays. Resilience is that crucial mental adaptability to just absorb and recover from those setbacks. It's the superpower of interpreting challenges not as permanent endpoints, but as necessary, valuable learning opportunities. This single, adaptable trait is what ultimately separates the people who finally achieve their goals from the ones who just abandon ship. And working right alongside resilience is self-awareness. I want you to think of this as your brain's master override switch. It's your ability to step back and observe your own thoughts, your emotions, and your behaviors without slapping an immediate judgment on them. It keeps you off autopilot. Without self-awareness, especially today, fighting against modern distractions and endless information overload, your mind is just going to naturally drift away from your intended goals. All right, our final stop, Section 5, the Master Builder, the true purpose of goals.
Actually sustaining your goals over time requires a really delicate balance. See, an overly rigid mind quickly becomes stressed, totally inflexible, and is at a massive risk of burning out completely. But on the other extreme, an overly relaxed mind completely lacks direction and will stall out any steady progress you've made. So, finding that Goldilocks sweet spot right between structured planning and relaxed adaptability is exactly what ensures that your goals remain not just achievable, but genuinely sustainable over the long haul. So, taking a step back, why are we doing all of this in the first place? Well, the ultimate payoff really comes down to alignment. When your goals are deeply aligned with your own internal values, it creates this profound sense of lasting satisfaction and transcendent purpose. You're getting real fulfillment, way beyond just looking successful on paper. In stark contrast, if you're chasing goals driven purely by external validation, sure, you might get a taste of temporary success, but it inevitably leads to a fundamental feeling of emptiness and lasting dissatisfaction. The journey between where your mind is now and where your goal lives is filled with intense doubt, struggle, and growing pains. But here's the beautiful part. That very real, physical journey of pursuing the goal is exactly what transforms and upgrades your internal capabilities over time. Every single challenge you face and overcome literally reshapes your mind. It leaves you stronger, more resilient, and infinitely more capable for whatever pursuit comes next. Which leaves us with one pretty vital question to chew on. Are your goals merely tools for achievement, or are they true expressions of your identity? Think about that deeply for a minute. Mastering your own mind isn't just a clever strategy for crossing some finish line. It is literally the foundation of living a meaningful, purposeful life. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer today, and I really hope this helps you go out and build the architecture of your own ambition.